Chapter 29. The House of Morrel and Son. Anyone who had quitted Marseille a few years previously, well acquainted with the interior of Morrel's warehouse, and had returned at this date, would have found a great change. Instead of that air of life, of comfort, and of happiness that permeates a flourishing and prosperous business establishment, instead of merry faces at the windows, busy clerks hurrying to and fro in the long corridors, instead of the court filled with bales of good, re-echoing with the cries and jokes of porters, one would have immediately perceived all aspect of sadness and gloom. Out of all the numerous clerks that used to fill the deserted corridor and the empty office, but two remained. One was a young man of 3 or 4 and 20, who was in love with Monsieur Morrel's daughter, and had remained with him in spite of the efforts of his friends to induce him to withdraw. The other was an old one-eyed cashier called Cocles, or Cockeye, nickname given him by the young men who used to throng this vast, now almost deserted beehive, and which had so completely replaced his real name that he would not, in all probability, have replied to anyone who addressed him by it. Cocles remained in Monsieur Morrel's service, and a most singular change had taken place in his position. He had at the same time risen to the rank of cashier and sunk to the rank of a servant. He was, however, the same Cocles, good, patient, devoted, but inflexible on the subject of arithmetic, the only point on which he would have stood firm against the world, even against Monsieur Morrel, and strong in the multiplication table, which he had at his fingers' end, no matter what scheme or trap was laid to catch him. All right, we are going to Morrel. We are exploring Morrel's life, as we had predicted in a previous chapter. And what we get here is Dumas using something, a device that he likes to use often, which is a sort of poetic contrast, a juxtaposition of what once was and what now is, so that we can understand the change that has occurred, which he almost explicitly says here. That first sentence, which says, anyone who had quitted Marseille a few years previously, ... would have found a great change. He goes on to illustrate what is no longer there by talking about what once was there. So, a life of comfort, happiness that permeates a flourishing and prosperous business, merry faces at the windows, busy clerks hurrying to and fro. You get the sense, he compares it to a beehive, and you get the sense that Morrel's company was thriving, active, and producing. If we want to take that beehive metaphor all the further, it was producing honey. It was a thriving business for many worker bees to know their part and have a kind of running economy. And now none of those things exist except for two characters who we are introduced here, one more than the other, is a young man of 23 or 24 who's in love with Morrel's daughter. And we have a one-eyed cashier called Cocles. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because the second I looked up the pronunciation, I'm like, oh boy, how am I gonna not laugh at Cocles? Let's really emphasize the co part of that, because Cocles is not something I'm going to be able to get through. God, I can be immature sometimes. I'm so sorry, everyone. But Dumas also rife with symbolism. Anytime you get an epic story and you have a one-eyed character, almost certainly they are representative or symbolic of something. The all-seeing eye of Sauron, or Polyphemus, who ironically is named after the many-voiced. So it's, whether you're using it to directly symbolize something or juxtapose meaning, you can't put a one-eyed character in your story without it meaning something. So what is Cocles symbolizing with his one eye here? Well, we understand why the young man is sticking around, because he's in love with Morrel's daughter. Why would an older gentleman stick around a failing business, especially when, as it says here in this last paragraph, that he simultaneously rose to the rank of cashier, which was a position of respect at the time. Cashiers were positions of extreme trust to the community and to businesses, because they handed loans. They did all the bills of exchange. They kept every establishment's accounts. They safeguarded the money. So, like, there's a lot of trust that has to go into these positions. So he rose to the rank of a very trusted position, but at the same time as the business was going under, he also sank to the role of a servant, which sometimes happens when you have to, like when businesses are first starting up, every person's taking on multiple roles at once. I guess that's the same. If businesses are going under, you start to assume more roles than your position actually outlines. So, but why is he staying in that? Like, he's got the rank and title of cashier now, but he's having to be a servant, especially in his old age. However, Dumas describes him as good, patient, devoted, inflexible on the subject of arithmetic. So it seems like he is kind of loyal. I've got my thesaurus out and looking up what devoted. But he's in a position where he's able to commit himself to his virtues, it sounds like. So that would be a hard thing to give up. You're at a specific age, and then the place you've been employed and dedicated to for so long is going under. Do you go start over somewhere else at a lesser position? I would imagine he's like, I'm so close to retirement. He's almost stepping into that I'm one day from retirement role that you see in so many silly action films, where maybe he's like, if I can really I can ride this out. I'm going to just see it through to the end because, like, what else am I going to do? Where else am I going to go at my age? I've earned this, and for better or ill, I'm going to see it through to the end. Not a lot of story in today's episode. So I guess we'll have to continue here through chapter 29. Just a little weird bit of housekeeping here. I don't know why. This is probably not of interest to anyone but myself, but chapter 29 is much longer than chapter 28 by twofold. Chapter 30 is even longer. Chapter 31 looks to be our longest chapter yet. So and I say that just to kind of like wrap my head around where we're heading with this story. We are going to be settling into some stuff now, and I'm kind of excited for that. I feel like it's been a half a second. Dante's been traveling the world, getting stories. Now we're actually going to settle into something, and that's exciting. So join me here tomorrow as we continue with chapter 29 and find out what we'll be settling into for the next month or so of this podcast. Until then, you know where to find me. Okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.